Lance Stroll has been quite vocal about his future in Formula One, and despite all of the criticism he's faced in the past couple of months, the Canadian driver is not willing to let go of his dreams of winning races with Aston Martin further down the line. Although that mission has been made quite impossible given the regressing form that the Silverstone-based squad has had, as well as the massive gap between him and Alonso, Stroll has dropped a bombshell on the F1 critics when talking about his tenure in the team that is possessed by his father. With this in mind, will we see an end to the nepotistic relationship at Aston Martin? And more importantly, what does the future hold for Lance Stroll? Lance Stroll is easily one of the most criticised and hated drivers on the grid, and with all the right reasons. The Canadian driver has been lacking a lot of performance in the past season, but in the past couple of races, he's been able to out-qualify his teammate Alonso and even out the score 4-4 before the Canadian Grand Prix, in which the Spaniard took matters in his own hands and went 5-4. But if you are to look at the points in the Constructors' Championship, you'll notice that Aston Martin has a much bigger chance of fighting to keep the 5th spot rather than attack Mercedes for the 4th. And a great reason for that lies in the performance of Lance Stroll. After 9 rounds in 2024, Lance has only 17 points compared to Alonso, who's already at 41. This is still 3 times less than what it was before the beginning of the Montreal Grand Prix. And while it was positive for Aston Martin to extend the lead over the Racing Bulls, who managed to score only 4 points thanks to Ricciardo, Lance is still sitting behind Tsunoda in the Drivers' Championship at 17 points. Be that as it may, it goes without question that the future of Stroll has been constantly brought to the discussion in Aston Martin. And while his father has publicly stated that as long as he's the leader of the team, his son's seat is safe, there are bigger partners coming on the door, such as Honda. And when you come from a team like Red Bull, the last thing that you'd want to see is a pay driver who is his seat protected and not threatened under any circumstances. That does not seem to bother Lance at all. And when talking about the constant pressures that have been applied on his head after the downfall that his team has entered from 2023 onwards, Lance said, "No, it hasn't done anything negative to me. It's part of it. It's kind of just what my career has been made of. I've dealt with that over the years, but I do my talking on the track. I have no interest in leaving Aston. We're on a super exciting trajectory and a project as Aston Martin. I am much more excited to be a part of this journey than just going to another team to say that I could be driving somewhere else." The plan is to continue with Aston Martin. It's still very early with stuff to be decided for next year, but I'm super committed to being here. The interesting situation here is that literally no team on the grid has expressed interest in Lance Stroll, and whether we like it or not, his seat is only secured thanks to his father's ownership of the team. That narrative has been present ever since 2018. And while the investment was quite huge at the beginning, it started to simmer down slowly but surely in terms of the commandment of the team. Lawrence has sold quite a bit of minority stakes to the companies like Arctos, and with Aramco's interest in completing a buyout of Aston Martin completely, it's safe to assume that the situation could change quite quickly if the team does not start to score results right away. Even Mike Crack, the team principal of Aston Martin, went on to say that he believes the home of Lance is in Aston Martin. And although the news was primarily revolving around Alonso until he renewed his contract with the Silverstone-based squad, now it's time for them to focus on Lance and make sure that they provide him with all the opportunities he needs in order to compete. Every F1 fan knows that the problem is not in the team despite their recent downfall with the upgrades, which have been labelled as downgrades by the F1 experts. But nonetheless, to believe that Lance and Aston Martin won't continue together with Lawrence at the helm of the team is definitely nonsense at this point. If we were to compare a competitive driver to Alonso, however, the dip in performance wouldn't be as visible, because we've seen that the 2-time world champion is able to drive the car to its absolute maximum, even though over 1 lap of performance that might not be as visible as it is on Sunday, when it matters the most. The team built brand new facilities in Silverstone, including a new wind tunnel that will help them in the independence process from Mercedes. But then again, the 2026 regulations will be a true indicator as to where this team will end up in the foreseeable future. While there are still some variables to be fixed at Aston Martin, there is one weak link that needs to be addressed immediately, and that's Lance Stroll. Huge gaps between teammates are not uncommon in Formula One, and if we were to look at the gap between Verstappen and Perez, we might not add too much importance to the one in Aston Martin. However, it must be added that in Red Bull, the first driver wins races and championships, That kind of covers the disadvantage that Perez has dealt to his team in the past couple of races, despite securing a 2-year deal, which does not mean that the Constructors' Championship is safe. Quite the contrary. But if you're a team like Aston Martin that's looking to break through the midfield and enter the top 3 conversation, like it did at the beginning of the 2023 season, you must have 2 drivers who will be competing at the top, and not just one. This is the narrative that McLaren, Ferrari and Mercedes drivers are all betting on, for all the right reasons. And it does look like Aston Martin will be quite far away from the top 4 if they continue with this driver lineup. The situation is quite visible and clear. Lance is planning to stay with Aston Martin, and this implies a lot of bad news for the team because he's not in the position in which he feels threatened for his seat. The comfort zone that his father was able to build for his son is now slowly but surely starting to creep back and threaten to ruin all the investments that Lawrence made in the team, starting with the technical staff and ending with all of the facilities back in Silverstone. A reconstruction might be on its way, as the Canadian billionaire is already showing signs of dissatisfaction as to why upgrades are being brought to the car and it's not performing the way it should, with the team being ultimately one of the slowest in Imola despite bringing the largest upgrade package there, which is kind of good news for Stroll, because for once he can blame the car for not delivering the kind of performance it should. Paradoxically enough, this was the race in which Stroll managed to score 2 points, while Alonso notched his career's worst finish at P19, which may imply the fact that Lance could be good at driving bad cars, a theory that can be debunked right away if we look at the 2021 and 2022 seasons of Lance and Sebastian Vettel. As for Lance, he's been quite straightforward when it comes to competing with his current teammate Fernando Alonso, and when talking about their head-to-head comparison, he went on to say that they're currently tied at 4-4 before the Canadian Grand Prix, and he's beaten the 2-time world champion in the past 3 weekends, so we shouldn't take that as we want. Still, there's hope at the end of the tunnel that we'll see a competitive driver next to Alonso that will push the team in a certain direction thanks to the arrival of Honda, as we've seen that the Japanese manufacturer takes a lot of care for their drivers and wants them to be constantly racing in Formula 1. Given the fact that Yuki Tsunoda's future in Red Bull is now very unlikely to happen, and the maximum he could achieve is being the lead driver in Racing Bulls, he could be looking for a change of scenery. But in order for that to happen, Honda would really have to apply a massive amount of pressure to Lawrence in order to make him realise that this nepotism is bad for his business too. At this point, it looks like the only thing that the Canadian billionaire is caring about is having a seat for his son, which, as I mentioned earlier in this video, would not even be in the question had it not been for him owning the team. But times change, and in this sport it's all about business and satisfying your business partner's requests. Therefore, it's up to us to hope that we will be able to see a change of scenery in Aston Martin. But it's also up to all the sides involved to let Lawrence know that just because it's his son doesn't mean that they will be participating in this charade anymore. With this in mind, do you think that Stroll should continue racing in F1? And do you think there's an improvement written in the stars for him? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, make sure to click on the video that's appearing on your screen right now.